You can stand on a Florida balcony today and see everything people were promised. Sunlight on the water, palm trees, a lifestyle that still photographs beautifully. And yet, beneath that surface calm, something isn't holding the way it used to. Condos that look desirable are no longer behaving like assets that people rush to own. Prices stall. Listings linger. Reductions appear quietly. Nothing looks broken, which is exactly why this moment matters. This isn't a sudden crash and it isn't panic. It's a delayed reckoning. The math that was ignored during the rush years is finally catching up. Insurance renewals reset higher. HOA budgets tighten. Reserve requirements surface. The post-pandemic optimism that carried thin margins has faded, and what remains is arithmetic that no longer stretches. Florida didn't change overnight. The bills did. If you've been watching Florida closely, you've probably felt this disconnect already. Headlines still talk about demand, migration, and sunshine. But behavior tells a different story. Buyers hesitate. Sellers wait. Agents lower expectations quietly. The market isn't collapsing loudly. It's recalibrating without asking permission. That's what makes this phase easy to miss. Markets rarely announce turning points. They whisper through small signals. Longer days on market, failed contracts, growing inventory that doesn't move with confidence. These are not signs of fear. They're signs of evaluation returning after years of momentum. This video isn't here to scare you. It's here to name what others avoid articulating. Florida condos still look appealing, but the illusion of effortless appreciation is breaking. And when illusions fade, reality doesn't arrive with drama. It arrives with silence. If you're noticing this shift before it becomes obvious, you're not late. You're early. Subscribe and hit the bell, because Florida breaks quietly before it breaks loudly, and patience now becomes the real advantage most people miss. Condos almost always show stress before houses, and it isn't because they're inferior homes. It's because they are shared financial systems disguised as simple ownership. When you buy a condo, you're not just buying walls and a view. You're buying into everyone else's decisions, timing, and risk tolerance, whether you like it or not. In strong markets, that structure feels invisible. Fees feel stable. Maintenance feels routine. Insurance feels like a background line item. But when costs rise, condos have nowhere to hide. Risk doesn't stay individual, it pools. And pooled risk amplifies pressure fast. Insurance is the first crack. Condo associations insure entire buildings, not individual units. When premiums spike or carriers pull back, the increase doesn't land softly. It gets divided across owners, often suddenly, often without options. A single storm season or regulatory shift can reset costs permanently, and no owner can opt out. Then, come reserves and deferred maintenance. Many buildings postponed expensive work during the boom because prices were rising and buyers weren't asking hard questions. Roofs, balconies, concrete, plumbing, electrical systems all aged quietly. When inspections, new laws, or reserve studies force reality, the bill arrives as a special assessment. Thousands, sometimes tens of thousands. Due on a timeline the owner didn't choose. This is where condos break psychologically. Buyers realize the price they're paying isn't the price they're committing to. Monthly dues can change. Assessments can appear. Insurance can rise again. None of that is capped. A house owner controls most risks directly. A condo owner absorbs them collectively, even when neighbors can't pay. HOA finances add another layer of fragility. Associations rely on full participation. When some owners fall behind, everyone else carries the gap. Deferred dues become deferred maintenance, which becomes higher future costs. It's a feedback loop buyers are learning to spot quickly. This doesn't mean condos are bad. It means they are sensitive. They respond first when conditions tighten. Prices soften not because the units lost charm, but because the obligations lost predictability. Buyers don't fear the building, they fear uncertainty. Once you understand this, the pattern stops feeling random. Condos don't fall first because they're unwanted. They fall first because they reveal risk faster than any other housing type. That understanding replaces panic with logic, and logic restores calm, because once risk is named and measured, buyers stop guessing, sellers stop blaming, and the market becomes readable instead of emotionally overwhelming again for most people. If this explanation is changing how you see condos, hit the bell now. Florida's condo market isn't cracking because buyers suddenly became pessimistic. It's cracking because the numbers stopped cooperating, and Florida's insurance and HOA structure exposes that faster than anywhere else in the country. For years, insurance felt abstract. Premiums rose, but slowly. Coverage existed. Associations renewed without drama. That changed almost overnight. Carriers pulled back, deductibles jumped, exclusions widened, and entire buildings were reclassified as higher risk. Those increases didn't hit sellers emotionally. They hit buyers mathematically. Then came the post-Surfside reality. New reserve requirements, structural inspections, and mandatory funding schedules forced buildings to confront decades of deferred maintenance at once. Concrete restoration, balcony repairs, roof replacements, electrical upgrades, work that was always coming, now arriving on a fixed clock. The bill didn't disappear. It was divided. This is where deals unravel quietly. Buyers fall in love with the unit first. The view works. The light works. The price feels reasonable relative to last year. Emotionally, the decision feels settled. Then the HOA documents arrive. Buried inside are reserve studies projecting major assessments, insurance line items doubling or tripling, notes about pending engineering reports, language that sounds cautious but carries weight. Suddenly, the future cost isn't hypothetical. It's scheduled. Loss aversion takes over here. Buyers don't fear missing the condo. They fear being trapped inside a rising obligation they can't control or exit easily. They imagine paying today's price while tomorrow's owner pays less, simply because assessments reset the market. This is why Florida condos lose liquidity before they lose headlines. Financing tightens when monthly dues spike. Buyers who could qualify last year no longer can. Investors disappear because cash flow breaks. Even cash buyers hesitate when resale risk becomes obvious. Nothing about this feels dramatic in the moment. There's no shouting, no panic, just silence. A request for clarification. A longer pause. Then a polite withdrawal. What makes this painful is that the buildings didn't suddenly become unsafe or undesirable. The math changed. And math doesn't negotiate with emotion. Florida amplifies this effect because weather risk, insurance fragility, and regulatory enforcement converge at once. Buyers aren't rejecting condos, they're rejecting uncertainty. Once buyers understand they can walk away without penalty, they do. Not angrily, calmly. Walking away feels safer than committing to costs they didn't choose. This shift explains why sellers feel confused, buyers feel relieved, and markets feel stuck. Even while listings remain visible, prices appear reasonable, and nothing outwardly signals distress yet to observers everywhere. This is where many Florida condo deals end, not at the showing, but at the spreadsheet stage. And once buyers experience that clarity, they don't unlearn it. They bring it to every listing afterward. Hit the bell. This is where most Florida condo deals collapse. Before we start naming cities, it's important you understand how this list was built, because this isn't a vibes ranking or a headline remix. It's a behavior map. Every city on this countdown earned its place through pressure, not popularity. We looked first at price movement, not year-over-year averages, but rolling declines across comparable condo inventory, where reductions cluster, not where a single sale dipped. Then we measured days on market, because time reveals stress before prices do. When condos linger longer than nearby single-family homes, liquidity is already breaking. Next came inventory growth. Not just more listings, but more relistings, failed contracts, and units returning after quiet withdrawals. That pattern tells you buyers are visiting, calculating, and leaving. That matters more than raw supply. We then layered in HOA distress. Rising dues, special assessments, deferred maintenance flags, reserve shortfalls, and documented funding gaps. These aren't opinions. They're disclosed obligations buyers must absorb. Cities with the fastest escalation here rise quickly on this list. Insurance exposure was unavoidable. Premium spikes, carrier exits, deductibles, and coverage exclusions hit condos first. Where insurance costs doubled or became unstable, affordability collapsed regardless of view or location. Finally, we studied buyer behavior. Are buyers negotiating aggressively, walking after document review, refusing appraisal gaps? Behavior confirms stress long before sellers accept it. This isn't about shaming cities or predicting collapse. It's about identifying where math overpowered momentum. Number 10 shows early fractures. Number 1 shows what happens when all pressures converge at once. That final city isn't just a market, it's a warning. Subscribe, because data beats headlines every time. Watch the countdown closely because the order matters. The pattern repeats elsewhere, and recognizing it early gives you optionality, leverage, and time, while others wait for headlines to tell them what already happened there. This is where the shift becomes visible, not loud. Number 10 opens in clear water. On the surface, nothing looks broken. The water still sparkles, retirees still tour, and listings still describe sunsets and maintenance-free living. But the behavior underneath has changed. Condos here are sitting longer, not because buyers vanished, but because aging buildings are colliding with new insurance math. Buyers walk through, nod, then pause when HOA documents reveal rising dues tied to roof replacements and structural studies. Price cuts appear quietly, almost apologetically. Sellers insist it's seasonal. Buyers know it's structural hesitation. Number 9 is Fort Myers. This market carries the scars of storm exposure more visibly, and buyers feel it immediately. Flood zones that once felt manageable now feel uncertain. Insurance quotes arrive late in the process and derail confidence. Units don't fail inspection, but they fail imagination. Buyers picture future premiums, not present views. Listings linger while sellers wait for the right buyer, unaware that buyers are recalculating risk rather than negotiating price. Inventory doesn't explode here. It accumulates slowly, which is more dangerous. Number 8 takes us to Daytona Beach. This is where investor math begins to unravel. Condos, once pitched as affordable coastal plays, now face shrinking rental margins. Short-term demand softened, expenses climbed, and investors quietly stepped back. Owner-occupants feel the shift indirectly. They notice fewer competitive offers, more relisted units, and sellers offering credits instead of confidence. Buildings with older mechanical systems feel heavier now, not because they're broken, but because they're expensive to future-proof. Buyers hesitate, then wait, then move on. Number 7 is St. Petersburg's non-trophy condo corridors. The lifestyle narrative still works, but only up to a point. Buyers love the walkability and culture, but they're no longer willing to subsidize HOA budgets built for a different era. Reserve requirements tightened, dues rose, and special assessments became real conversations. Deals don't fall apart loudly. They dissolve after document review. Sellers cut prices slightly, then wait. Buyers interpret waiting as leverage. Days on market stretch just enough to change psychology. Number 6 is Hollywood, Florida. This is where flood exposure, aging stock, and HOA strain converge quietly. Towers that once sold on proximity now face scrutiny over future retrofits. Buyers tour twice. They ask about concrete restoration, elevator modernization, and insurance renewals. Sellers sense resistance but don't fully adjust. Units sit. Reductions cluster. Not dramatic, but undeniable. The market hasn't rejected these condos, it's slowed them into submission. What ties these 5 cities together isn't collapse, it's denial paired with math. Sellers still believe demand will return unchanged. Buyers know better. They're not scared. They're selective. And selection reshapes markets faster than fear ever does. This is the early fracture phase. Nothing feels urgent, which is exactly why pressure builds unnoticed. Stay with us. This accelerates fast from here. This is where the story stops being subtle. At number 5, Miami's non-trophy condo inventory tells a different truth than the skyline suggests. Buildings without direct waterfront or luxury branding are absorbing the pressure first. Listings cluster with repeated reductions, not because units look worse, but because buyers won't stretch anymore. Appraisals come in low, forcing renegotiations that stall or collapse. Investors who once absorbed excess supply quietly step back, leaving owner-sellers exposed. Liquidity fades before confidence does, and that gap creates real damage. Number 4 is Tampa's older, coastal condo stock. Here, the breakdown isn't cosmetic, it's financial. HOA fees jump sharply after reserve studies. Insurance premiums rewrite budgets overnight. Buyers tour, like the layout, then hesitate when documents reveal future obligations they can't control. Listings relaunch after failed contracts. Each relaunch trains the next buyer to wait. Prices fall not in a single drop, but through exhaustion. Sellers chase the market downward, one reduction at a time, until momentum disappears entirely. Number 3 brings us to Fort Lauderdale's mid-tier high-rises. These buildings were never cheap, but they relied on constant demand to justify it. That demand has thinned. You see it in empty open houses, extended marketing times, and appraisal gaps that sellers refuse to bridge. Units don't clear at ask anymore. They negotiate, then renegotiate again. When sellers hold firm, buyers leave calmly. Liquidity loss spreads building by building, not headline by headline. The aesthetic still sells. The exit does not. Number 2 is Naples' non-luxury condo segment, and this is where belief collides with reality most clearly. The lifestyle narrative remains powerful, but the buyer pool narrowed dramatically. Cash buyers become selective. Financed buyers face insurance and HOA math that breaks deals late. Listings stack quietly. Price cuts cluster within the same buildings, creating internal competition that destroys leverage. Once a single unit sells lower, the rest follow. This isn't fear. It's arithmetic taking control. Across these markets, the same pattern repeats. Reductions stop signaling opportunity and start signaling distress. Failed listings linger digitally, visible to every new buyer. Appraisal gaps widen. Investors exit first, then owners feel the vacuum. The damage isn't the view or the finishes. It's the inability to exit cleanly without surrendering value. This is what visible breakdown looks like. Not boarded windows or panic, headlines, but lost liquidity. Homes that still look desirable but can't convert interest into commitment. When buyers realize they can wait without consequence, sellers lose timing power. And timing is everything in real estate. If you're watching these cities from the outside, this is the moment most people recognize too late. Prices don't fall because something looks wrong. They fall because too many owners need buyers who no longer need them. That imbalance compounds quietly until it becomes undeniable. Hit the bell. This is where denial ends. Number 1 is Miami Beach, and it earns this position not because it is failing the fastest, but because it explains everything else. Miami Beach is the clearest expression of Florida's condo reality, compressed into one place. It has sun, demand, global recognition, and constant attention. If the condo model were going to hold anywhere, it would hold here. And that's exactly why what's happening matters far beyond Florida. This is where insurance pressure, post-Surfside regulation, HOA realities, and buyer psychology all collide at once. Premiums reset sharply. Reserve requirements force associations to confront decades of deferred maintenance. Special assessments arrive not as hypotheticals but as line items. Buyers still show up emotionally. They love the lifestyle. They imagine mornings by the water. Then the documents arrive, and the numbers change the conversation. Listings don't vanish, they stack. Units relaunch quietly after failed contracts. Price cuts cluster within the same buildings, creating internal competition that no view can overcome. Appraisal gaps widen because buyers no longer agree with yesterday's math. Investors who once absorbed inventory step aside first, and owners feel that absence immediately. Liquidity thins, not because Miami Beach lost appeal, but because the exit became uncertain. What makes this city the canary is that nothing here is obscure. These are known buildings, known streets, known markets. When buyers hesitate here, it signals something structural, not local. The condo isn't just a home anymore. It's a financial system bound to insurance markets, regulatory timelines, shared balance sheets, and collective decision-making. When one part strains, the whole asset feels heavier. This is not a crash story. It's a preview. Miami Beach shows what happens when desirability collides with limits. Buyers aren't rejecting the lifestyle. They're rejecting open-ended risk. They don't fear ownership. They fear being trapped inside, costs they can't control or exit cleanly. Nationally, this matters because Florida has been the test case. High exposure, fast growth, and heavy investor participation accelerated both the boom and the reckoning. What happens here doesn't stay here. Other coastal and HOA-heavy markets watch the same buyer behavior ripple outward. If you're seeing this clearly now, you're early. Not early because you predicted a collapse, but because you recognized a transition. Safe assets are becoming scarcer, not cheaper, and scarcity no longer belongs to sellers alone. Miami Beach isn't the exception, it's the explanation. Subscribe. This city explains what happens next. This moment isn't just about Florida condos. Florida is simply where the math broke first, where climate exposure, insurance repricing, and HOA obligations collided fast enough to become visible. What you're watching is a leading indicator, not a local failure. Similar pressures exist anywhere. Risk is shared, costs are pooled, and owners rely on stable assumptions that no longer hold. Florida condos didn't collapse because people stopped loving the sun or the water. They stalled because the systems supporting ownership demanded clarity all at once. Insurance stopped being background noise. Reserve studies stopped being optional. Deferred maintenance stopped being theoretical. When those realities surfaced together, buyers paused, not in fear, but in self-protection. That pause is spreading. Coastal markets, high-rise communities, master plan developments with complex HOAs. Anywhere ownership depends on collective finances rather than individual control is watching buyers ask harder questions. Not whether a home is beautiful, but whether the structure behind it is resilient. Florida just happens to be the first place where enough variables stacked at once to force that conversation into the open. This is why calling this a crash misses the point. Crashes are sudden and emotional. This is deliberate and structural. Markets are renegotiating expectations around risk, liquidity, and responsibility. Prices adjust not because demand vanished, but because buyers refuse to absorb uncertainty without compensation. That's not collapse. That's repricing reality. For sellers, this is uncomfortable but clarifying. Belief alone no longer carries value. Transparency does. Flexibility does. For buyers, this is empowering. Walking away isn't failure anymore. It's participation on better terms. The leverage hasn't disappeared. It has redistributed to those willing to slow down and understand what they're buying. The real opportunity in moments like this isn't prediction, it's awareness. When you see where stress shows up first, you learn where it's likely to surface next. Florida condos are the early chapter, not the whole book. Insurance markets, regulatory responses, and shared risk ownership models are being rewritten in real time. That's why this channel exists. Not to amplify fear, but to connect patterns before they harden into outcomes. Use the comments to share what you're seeing in your city. HOA notices, insurance renewals, price behavior. Those small signals matter when viewed together. We'll keep following how this reset unfolds, where risk is migrating and which assets adapt instead of breaking. Pay attention now, because moments like this rarely feel urgent, in real time, yet they quietly determine who adapts early, who hesitates too long, and who absorbs the cost later. Stay subscribed. This cycle rewards the prepared as conditions continue to change nationwide.